There are several important things you have to keep in mind when it comes to identification of the living world, plants, insects, whatever you want to identify. You need to ask yourself several questions, and you are probably asking yourself those since you are watching this video. It's how to identify and how to be sure. So we are going to stick to those two basics with, of course, some mandatory warnings and calls for caution. There is more than one thing to identify things today, and one of the most common one and most popular one these days, well, for the several past years, has been using of various apps for identification of this and that. Of course, using AI. There is one important thing that should be mentioned here, even though it is kind of off topic, but still kinda on topic as well, and you will get what I mean in a second. If you are a nature lover, if you come into the forest and you look around and you want to know what this tree is and what is this bug and stuff, more than likely you're the kind of person who likes nature and who wants to protect the environment. And AI and data centers they use, as you probably already know, is not really something that helps the environment. Now, I won't moralize here and suggest that you should do this or that. As I said, it's really a different topic. It's an important one. It's just not for this video. So I will tell you my experience and I will leave the decision up to you. What I noticed in the last several years is, truth be told, AI and apps using it for identification of this and that have got a lot better than they used to be. They are a lot more accurate, but still there is a lot of work to do. And as the warnings on the apps will tell you themselves, you should never, ever, and I mean ever, rely on AI to tell you if something is safe for consumption. No matter if you want to eat it or drink it or use it in some other way, don't rely solely on AI. What I did and what I do most of the time when I do use AI is I use it when I really need help, when I really get stuck. I use it as a way to direct me to possibilities, you know. It will tell you this is most likely this and that, and some clues that you need to look further, and then I would consult some other sources to see if those clues are really showing that thing is really the thing I think it is. The most traditional way to do these things is to bring your field guides with you. The best ones are the ones that are small enough to fit. Okay, you would need a bit larger pocket for these, but anyway, to fit in your backpack or somewhere else, and they are not too heavy usually. Well, at least if they are paperback, this one can be a bit more heavy. So depending on your fitness and on the muscles you have and your tolerance of heavy stuff, you will bring the suitable thing for you. Not all field guides are the same, and again there is an important sort of quite new problem with these things, because there are books that now you can find and order that are written by AI, or people without experience, or people without much experience with the help of AI, and they are presented as field guides for this and that. There is a YouTuber, Atomic Shrimp, that did a very awesome video about detailed coverage of this topic, so I will leave it up to you to check it more if you're interested. So not all books are the same, not just because something is a physical book. It's something that should be looked at as absolutely truthful and accurate. So when it comes to what kind of books, now when you get to that point, when you investigate the authors and reviews and you just don't want any book, you want the one that is as accurate as possible and recommended as much as possible, you find your books. I do recommend that you take ones that are illustrated, contrary to the one with the photographs. Now, photographs are not bad, and maybe actually both photographs and illustrations would be the best. But photographs only, they are not really reliable. always some part of the plant that's not showing properly, or maybe you don't see it properly, something is in the shadows. It can be a bit tricky, but with illustrations, that person who did illustration did every line with intent, every little dot on the drawing, every little color change or color detail, everything is there for a reason. Now, the person who was drawing these things did not draw it because they were bored. I will draw this detail on the leaf because I like it. No, everything is there for a reason, and that is what will help you when you look at the details yourself on the field. And tiny word of caution, there are also some quite old guides, let's say from the 90s, 80s. I don't want to say they are necessarily bad because they are old, but you can find some outdated information, especially in the terms of Latin names and classifications that changed in the meantime. But that is even a less concern. The more concern is sometimes things that were previously thought as safe are now thought as not safe, proven not safe. So that is also one of the reasons why you should be careful with the old stuff. The books that are talking about the lore, folklore, and traditional, folk usage based on some region, they might be good for historical usage and to sort of satisfy your curiosity, but be careful with those. So let's talk about the details here. Lots of the times details will matter a lot when you want to distinguish things, and these orchids are one of the best examples. One of these is called lady orchid. There are a lot of hybrids, and with hybrids and all the possible combinations and even different variety inside the same species, you can really find a lot of weird things. Now, here is what I'm talking about. In just around maybe 15 meters or so, I was able to find 3 to 4 different orchids that superficially look quite the same. But when you take a look at their flowers, do you see what I want to say? So some are bigger, smaller, some have spots, some have less spots, some are more elongated, some have tiny tails, some have bigger tails. Now you can laugh about this part of them, but let's call it tails. Nature really can crack a joke if you only are able to recognize it. What all these most likely are is a hybrid between a lady orchid and a monkey orchid. Maybe some of them are even clean lady orchids. I'm not sure. I am not really such an expert in orchids to recognize it just by the looks of it, but I'm saying what it likely is. So sometimes you will think you know what a thing is, you'll be almost sure that you know what it is, but when you take a deeper look, a closer look, you will discover that you were wrong, or at least that you were on the right track and you can cope with that fact. Let's see how it would actually look in the real life as we're trying to identify something. We will try to identify this plant over here. And it's a good thing because we already have one small challenge. As you can see, the flower is already gone off and we cannot really... Oh, there's a little bug living here. Excuse me. As you can see, it will be a bit harder to identify it just by the flowers because, well, they are a bit gone off. The thing is, I know what this plant is, but I am going to pretend that I don't, and I want to check it out over here. So let's do it. Firstly, some details that we can see here is it has 5 leaves. Important thing is these 2 leaves are very close to the stem. This will be a big, good clue when we are looking at how to identify it. We can also guess the flower was yellowish from what's left of it. And we can see the number of stems, the approximate size, and remember all of this. Now, let's have our book and take a look. Okay, the first thing I'm looking at is, of course, we are not going to dig deep into the introduction part, even though I always suggest that you read the introduction. Sometimes a good juicy information can be found there. And let's begin. I'm not going to stop on every single illustration just because we have limited time, but as you can see at a glance, you can already guess something is not right when you compare these. These are much more elongated leaves. The flowers look different. They are white. These leaves are smaller. So not to waste too much time, again, different colored flowers, different leaves, a whole different plant, and different leaves again. Not 5 leaves on a stem. Nope, nope, nope. Now here is something that maybe you would stop, but you would pretty much instantly notice that the leaves are much different, so you wouldn't waste your time here. And here is something quite tricky at first. You can see that superficially this looks quite a lot alike. So these are the leaves, which, you could say that they are kind of similar. Now this is something you should never use to be sure. You shouldn't rely on kind of. When you get to certain amount of experience and knowledge, you will be able to recognize certain family of plants, but we will come to that later. If you take any longer look, you will know that this is not quite this, even though it might be promising at first. Again, different leaves. At first you might think, kind of similar, but it is not really similar. So we need the exact thing, not kind of similar. And I will give you a second. Here it is. So if you look at details of this drawing, you see one stem, 5 leaves total, and 2 of them quite close to the stem. And you even have a drawing of how the flower looks in a later stage. Now this is intermediate stage between the one pictured here in full bloom and the one that's a bit gone off, but still. So wood avens, its roots are a fantastic pain medicine, and actually the same compound that's found in them is given to you when you are at the dentist. When you're sitting in a dentist chair and you are giving a local anesthetic, it has the compound that's present in the roots of this plant. How cool is that? There is one more way to identify things that doesn't necessarily include squatting in mosquito-infested shrubs. Speaking of the 80s and 90s and all the old times and things like that, another way you can learn is find a mentor. Maybe some older member of your family or friends or some acquaintance, or some groups you can go out with, or maybe even some individuals that could be your mentors. There are various kinds of groups you can join today, obviously, and you should really use this to your advantage. Again, I'm not saying go out with your grandparents and believe every single word they say. As I said, the beliefs, the knowledge changed over the years, and not necessarily every detail they tell you will be accurate today. But if not anything else, you will have a nice time networking with people or reconnecting with your grandparents. This is also one important note to have here, is the knowledge about the plants and how could they be used is really decreasing. And I think it's something that will go downwards pretty much as we go forward, because we as people are much less reliant on the plants, and the knowledge gap between the generation of our grandparents, even our parents. I'm a millennial, so when I say our parents, I'm talking about the boomer generation. Even they did have a bit more of a kind of preserved knowledge. I think around millennial age, we started disconnecting from all of these things, probably with the rise of the internet and everything else that's been said numerous times. No need for me to repeat it. But there is really, the point I want to make is, if you are interested in these things, I want you to grow even more knowledge about it, because you really never know when it will be useful to us again. If you want to dive a bit more into the topic, you can also visit the video about the identification of mushrooms. Many things I mentioned there are also valuable for whatever you want to identify. I hope this was useful to you, and see you next time.